Under the hot sun of a small African town, life often carried stories that no one could have imagined. Tales that danced between reality and legend, whispered in marketplaces, told around the fire, and carried by the wind through dusty streets. Among these stories was one about a girl, a frail and forgotten child who lived on the margins of society. Her name was never remembered the same way twice. Some called her Amara, others simply that homeless girl, because she had no family, no shelter, and no possessions except the torn dress on her back and the stubborn hope that tomorrow might be kinder. She wandered from village to village, sleeping in abandoned huts or under trees, feeding on scraps when someone was merciful enough to toss a piece of bread her way. But what made her different in the eyes of the people was not her poverty, but the strange aura that surrounded her. She had eyes that seemed to see deeper than most, hands that felt warm when they touched a wound, and whispers began to spread that perhaps she was no ordinary child. It was in this same town that a billionaire resided, a man known by many as Chief Okeke. His fortune stretched beyond borders, with businesses and estates, yet in his mansion filled with gold and servants, his heart remained troubled because his only daughter, Adewara, fell gravely ill. Doctors were flown in from across the continent, herbalists from distant lands were consulted, and even spiritual leaders prayed over her. But Adewara's condition worsened each day. Her once bright eyes dulled, her laughter silenced, and her body became as light as dry leaves in harmattan. The family that had everything suddenly found themselves powerless, helpless before an illness they could not name. Villagers whispered among themselves that perhaps it was a curse, others said it was punishment for the arrogance of the wealthy, and still, others claimed only something beyond science could heal the girl. Meanwhile, Amara drifted into this same town, searching for food near the market, but instead of pity, the people looked at her with suspicion. They remembered strange happenings when she passed by, how sick goats seemed to recover, or how a child's fever broke after she laid her hand on his forehead. To them, these were not blessings but signs of witchcraft. They accused her in harsh tones, calling her a child of darkness, a carrier of evil, and the market women chased her away with sticks and stones. The homeless girl had no one to defend her. Her tears mixed with the dust, and her cries echoed in the alleys as she fled. Yet she never raised her voice in anger, never cursed them back. She carried her pain in silence, believing that one day truth would reveal itself. One fateful evening, when the sky blushed orange, and the call to prayer drifted through the town, Chief Okeke's guards spotted Amara sitting quietly by the gates of the mansion, clutching her knees to her chest. They shouted at her to leave, thinking she had come to beg for food. But before they could drive her away, the billionaire's wife, Madame Ifeoma, stepped out, her eyes red with worry for her dying child. She looked at the homeless girl, and something stirred in her heart, a mother's intuition that saw beyond rags and dirt. Against the advice of her guards, she asked the girl why she sat there. Amara simply whispered, "I can help your daughter." Her voice trembled, but it carried conviction. The guards laughed at her words, mocking the idea that a homeless child could succeed where the world's best doctors had failed. But desperation makes the heart open to unlikely hopes. Madame Ifeoma pleaded with her husband to allow it, though Chief Okeke was furious at first. How could the fate of his only daughter be placed in the hands of a child accused of witchcraft? Yet when he looked at Adewara, barely breathing, he realized he had nothing to lose. Reluctantly he agreed, but with a warning: if the girl brought harm instead of healing, she would face dire consequences. They led Amara to Adewara's room, a chamber more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. Walls draped in silk, the air heavy with the scent of flowers and medicine. She approached the bed timidly, her heart pounding as eyes of the wealthy and powerful bore into her. She knelt beside Adewara, placed her small worn-out hands on the girl's chest, and closed her eyes. What happened next was a moment that no one in the room could ever explain. The air grew still, Adewara's shallow breathing deepened, her eyelids fluttered, and a faint color returned to her cheeks. Amara whispered words softly, words no one could recognize, not from any language known to them. After hours of this, Adewara slowly opened her eyes, weak but alive, her lips forming the word "Mama." Madame Ifeoma screamed with joy, falling to her knees, while Chief Okeke's mouth fell open in disbelief. The doctors, who had been helpless all this while, rushed forward to examine Adewara, but there was no denying the truth. She was healing. The news spread like wildfire across the town, from the markets to the schools. From the huts to the palaces, the same villagers who had called Amara a witch now gathered at the gates of the mansion, curious, bewildered, and ashamed. Some whispered that perhaps she was a child of God, an angel in disguise, while others struggled to swallow their pride after chasing her away. Chief Okeki, humbled beyond measure, brought the girl into his home, clothed her in new garments, and for the first time in her life, Amara sat at a table and ate a full meal. The billionaire publicly declared that this homeless girl had saved his family, and he would protect her at all costs. But not everyone rejoiced. Envy and fear took root in some hearts. Local leaders who had thrived on exploiting people's beliefs worried that Amara's gift would undermine their power. Whispers of witchcraft grew again, more vicious than before, because the human heart struggles to accept miracles without suspicion. Yet this time, Amara was not alone. The family she saved stood by her, shielding her from the hatred of those who could not understand. Chief Okeki went further. He decided to build a foundation in her name, dedicated to helping children like her homeless, abandoned, accused, and forgotten by society. He declared that no child should ever be punished for what they could not control, and that every child deserved love, shelter, and education. Amara's life transformed, but she remained humble. She never claimed to be special, never demanded riches or recognition. She only asked to learn, to go to school, and to grow like every other child. And in classrooms where once she might have been mocked, she now sat with determination, proving that miracles can open doors, but only hard work can walk through them. In time, Adora and Amara became inseparable, sisters not by blood, but by destiny. Their friendship was a symbol across the land, a story retold by griots, pastors, imams, and elders around firesides, teaching that we must not judge by appearances, nor condemn the weak, for the hand we reject today may be the very hand that saves us tomorrow. The story did not just end with one healing. Amara grew into a young woman whose touch brought comfort, whose words carried wisdom, and whose resilience inspired a nation. Some believed she was chosen by God, others said she was a reminder that greatness often hides in places we despise. Villagers, who had once cast stones, now bowed their heads in respect when she passed. And though the scars of rejection never fully left her heart, she forgave them all, understanding that ignorance had guided their cruelty. Years later, when Chief Okeki expanded his foundation across Africa, Amara stood beside him as living proof of transformation. She traveled to villages, speaking to children accused of witchcraft, to parents who abandoned their young out of fear, and to leaders who allowed such cruelty. Her story became a weapon against ignorance, and a light for those lost in darkness. And every time she stood on a stage, her voice steady and her eyes bright, she reminded the world of one truth: the weakest among us may carry the strongest gifts, and the ones we cast aside may be the very ones who hold the key to our salvation. This was the story of the homeless girl once accused of witchcraft, who healed a billionaire's daughter, and changed not just one family, but an entire generation's way of thinking. It was a tale of pain turned into purpose, rejection transformed into redemption, and poverty reshaped into power. And though it began in whispers of suspicion and hatred, it ended in a roar of hope, echoing far beyond the dusty streets of that small African town, into the hearts of all who believed that miracles still walk among us, dressed in rags, waiting for the moment to reveal themselves. Subscribe and share this story, so more hearts can be touched, more minds can awaken, and more voices can rise against ignorance. For every story shared becomes a seed planted in the soil of change, and who knows how many lives one simple story can transform.